Now, 96% of Irish primary schools are owned by the churches, and over 90% of them fall under Catholic Church patronage. Meanwhile, religious-owned schools make up just over half of all second-level schools. However, in a changing society with more pupils of different faiths or who don't practice any religion at all enrolling in our schools, should religious education be dropped from the syllabus entirely, and those who want it find it elsewhere? I'm joined by the chairperson of Atheist Ireland, Michael Nugent, and by Father Joe McDonald, parish priest of St. Matthew's, Ballyfermot. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning.
Now, Michael, there have been changes. I mean, the days of prayers before the school day started, I think are gone.
Well, it depends on what school you're in, and it depends, even within Catholic schools, it would depend on how liberal or conservative that the patrons are. The problem is that the patron bodies, which is mostly the Catholic Church, have so much power in terms of the ethos of the school. So even if you have an objective curriculum, it's still delivered through the ethos of the school. And we find as well that the ETBs, which are supposed to be the state alternative, close to secular alternative to the denominational schools, they're just as bad, and they indoctrinate children.
How so?
As well.
Explain.
Well, they have, in many cases, deals with the Catholic Church in terms of the ethos of the school. And recently the Department of Education...
But how does that manifest itself? Now, I'll give you an example from one of my colleagues who was at a Catholic secondary school for girls. And this is what used to go on. On December the 8th, the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, they had a procession in the school. They processed in the dark with torches singing hymns in Latin. And on the same day, the sixth-year pupils would become children of Mary and present lilies to the Virgin Mary and receive a medal in return. In assembly every morning, they'd say the morning offertory before school announcement. They would actually say the Hail Mary in French at the beginning of French class and another prayer at the beginning of maths class. That day, I suspect, has gone.
Yes, but that's a pretty low standard. I mean, we've moved on in terms of our recognition of human rights, in terms of recognition of the right to freedom of religion and belief, the right to freedom from discrimination, the right to equality before the law. All of these are human rights issues that should be reflected in our schools. Schools should respect equally the rights of religious and non-religious parents, but they don't. They breach those rights, and we've been told repeatedly by the UN Human Rights Committee. Now, there have been some attempts to change this recently in the ETB schools. Now, this is the smallest change possible. The Department of Education tried to bring in a directive that if you opt out of religion, which you have a constitutional right to, that you have to get an alternative subject as opposed to being made sit at the back of the school. Even that tiny change was resisted.
Yeah, but the schools were saying quite rightly, if you tell us we have to put on extra classes for people who are opting out of what is the curriculum for most people, give us the resources. The department didn't give them resources. I mean, if you do need extra teachers to fulfil that void, you need resources.
Well, that would be the case.
That, I think, was more the issue rather than a philosophical objection to the change.
No, actually it wasn't. Firstly, that would have been the case if they were asked to just add in an extra subject. They weren't asked to do that. What they were told is at the start of the next school year, before you put the timetable together, you have to find out who wants to do what, and that would include whether they want to do religion. Then you design the timetable with your existing resources around that. Now, there may have been...
Isn't that the department being a bit disingenuous, saying, we'll screw more out of you, but we won't pay you. No, because you are definitely going to have to do more to facilitate the opt-outs. You definitely have to.
In fact, you don't. There may be a tiny number of small schools where there's only one religion teacher that might be the case. But from the information that we've got under freedom of information from the ETB schools, that isn't the case in any school. And all religion teachers are able to teach other subjects as well.
Before I go to Father Joe, just outline what would you like to see in the schools? I mean, what should be there? Should it be absolutely no prayers, no reference to religion, nothing at all, and let the kids, knowing that, for example, because of maybe the dress of someone, that they are Muslim, that they learn nothing about the Muslim faith, why people are dressing differently, why people are not doing the things that they are doing. Do you think that there should be that void, or would it be helpful for the kids to understand difference?
Well, we think that schools should teach about religions and beliefs and ethics in an objective, critical and pluralistic way. And indeed, the NCCA tried to bring in that very subject a while ago in primary level, which was meant to replace, or not replace, but provide an alternative to the denominational religious education. But that was effectively blocked by the Catholic Church, who said that because they control the ethos of the schools, and they said that they object to teaching about religion objectively, because they say that you can't, because their purpose in running schools is to evangelise.
Father Joe.
The last point that Michael made, I would have a fair amount of empathy with it. And I do think there's a strong argument that we separate the idea of religious studies as an academic subject and what you might call religious education or faith development. But just...
By the way, I've just put it, I'd love to have learned the difference between Sunni and Shia in school.
Yeah.
I'd love to, because it would have informed a lot of what I've been doing ever since.
Yeah, and I think it is a very exciting subject. I taught it, I studied it and so on, and I taught both the faith development, non-exam RE, if you like, but I also taught religious studies to A level in the north. I do think that there is the moving on phrase that you used, Pat. One example, St. Clair's Harold's Cross, as an example of a Catholic school. It has Hindu, Sikh, Muslim, Jehovah's Witness and 6 other Christian denominations. They're all there. It's a Catholic school. The parents of all those different children.
What happens in that school?
What happens in that school? I mean, the one, to bring it to what I know what happens in St. Matthew's Parish, because I both have secondary schools and primary schools. In the secondary schools, for example, in the past 3 years, when we came to the graduation mass in Caritas College, the staff came to me and said, look, with 3 or 4 Muslim girls, they've been part of the journey, and so what are we going to do? Because I'm not always comfortable that it has to be Mass either, because Mass can be quite exclusive in the sense that, there's a very particular format, but even if it's a religious...
There's the taking of communion for
taking
many
of communion
people.
And all sorts of aspects of that are very specifically Catholic, and there's a place for it. But obviously there's also a place for a broader religious service. But we've had Mass and we have integrated the girls, the Muslim girls. They weren't forced to come, because sometimes the girl herself or her parents, by the time you get to graduation, it's the girl herself effectively makes the decision. And my thing about it is invite them. Say to them, you are welcome to be part of this. If you don't want to be part of it, that's also fine, right? But to come to a much more specific example, because I think the broader religious aspect, come to something like confirmation and Holy Communion. In the past 3 weeks, I have been, I would say, almost aggressively saying to parents, you have an option. These are Catholic parents, and I'm saying, you have an option. You do not have to have your child confirmed. Right? And presenting them with a very clear decision. And for example, in confirmation, people say things like, oh, Father, we want the big day. That's a very common phrase for we want our big day. And it's have the big day. And I will actually help you organise the graduation ceremony. And we'll have a graduation day, but we won't have confirmation. So the Catholic Church, I would be very clear on, certainly in the Dublin diocese, is really pushing forward into the new circumstances and the new Ireland, and recognising we're going to be smaller. But we also, and I said this recently to the Minister of Health down in the Kennedy Summer School, as we move forward and as we shed schools and as we divest and so on, my question then is, in the new Ireland, will it be okay to be Catholic?
And Michael?
Well, of course, everybody has the right to freedom of religion and belief, whether it's religious belief or non-religious belief, but the state should stay neutral. And that's the whole issue.
Is the model the public school system in the United States, where, they honour the flag in the mornings before they start, but that's it? If you want religious education, you have it in your local parish as Sunday school or Saturday afternoon school. Well, is that
that's certainly where faith formation should take place. As I say, I think that there should be an option to learn about religions and beliefs in an objective manner, in the same way as you learn about anything else. But again, the difficulty comes back not from the curriculum solely, but to the ethos of the schools. It doesn't matter how neutral a curriculum you have if it's delivered through the ethos of the schools. And one thing about the Catholic Church, it's in terms of the new schools, it's not really moving forward. What it's trying to do is saying, if we divest a tiny number of schools for which they're now trying to negotiate that they'll get a lease, by the way, for lease payments from the state, that they will have a stronger religious ethos in the schools that remain. Now, that might sound superficially fair, but it means for some parents who are in areas where there's only one school, not only will they not have access to a secular school, but their only option will be an even stronger Catholic ethos.
No, I think I don't agree, Michael. I think you're been a little bit unfair that I actually believe the Archbishop in Dublin anyway, which I could speak with some authority about, at least 10 years he has repeatedly pushed the divesting. The truth of the matter is, I'm actually familiar with one, and I'm not sure how comfortable to be talking about as specifics, but I am familiar with it, where the Archbishop was very clear, very open. There was an area with a number of schools, and he was very open that one of those schools would become an ETB school and so on. But the reality is, in local situations, there are various other factors, including parents and staff, by the way. And one of the things that comes up in terms of staff is, they say, oh yeah, we're very open to ETB and so on. Then they discover that their panel rights, in terms of, the panel that clears in the summer and last in and first out, and suddenly those rights are not guaranteed, because they are guaranteed in the mainstream system. So the government has to come forward and respect the fact that divesting is a lovely topic. The church is willing. We do not need all the schools that we have.
Yeah, but isn't there a danger that, like in the United States and in parts of Britain, you have, say, elite Catholic schools, fee-paying schools, where they have the Catholic ethos, and it just becomes another way to discriminate against people?
No, I get that, Pat. But look, surely, I mean, as Michael describes it, and, I hear, for example, the Taoiseach or Simon Harris, a lot of people, and I have huge respect for them, this sort of young, gifted politician who's talking about the new Ireland and so on. But surely if a group of parents want to use the phrase, buy into the Catholic ethos and have their
Should that be available? Michael, that's the point. If you have a large number of people in a particular area who say, we want a Catholic ethos in our schools. Now, we know that 10% of the people are other or no religion at all, but we still feel that for the vast majority, democracy at work, that this is the ethos we want. We will make allowances, we'll make all sorts of special arrangements for the others, but 90%, that should hold some weight.
Well, majoritarian democracy on the grounds of religion is something that I'm sure Father Joe would have opinions on from his background and probably wouldn't agree with in general. The state should remain neutral between religious beliefs. Just because there's a majority of parents in an area in favour of something, if hypothetically under that system, if there was a majority of parents in one area that wanted atheist schools, which by the way we don't want, but wanted schools that actively taught children that there was no God, and if there was even one set of Catholic parents
away from people that they already have. They choose a school on the basis that there is nominally, at any rate, a Catholic ethos, and they want that, and you're saying, well, we're going to take that away.
Yeah, a lot of people in privilege is taken away from them, think that it's some sort of discrimination against them.
That you start offering real alternatives. So you want the Catholic ethos, that's the school around the corner. But there is always going to be another option for you if you want something else.
I would have a philosophical objection to that anyway, because I don't think children should be discriminated or should be segregated on the grounds of religion in schools. I think that's a bad idea. I think children should be taught together. But even if you did that, why would only one religion, because it happens to be the majority, if you're in that majority, you get this special treatment and everybody else gets stuck in the other school with all the other weird minorities?
Yeah, some of what Michael's saying I do agree with, and I'm smiling at the curved ball now about the north and the schools and so on. I do get what you're saying, and I wouldn't be totally unsympathetic to it. But the reality is that parents have a right. Parents have a right in terms of the education of their child. And I think, and you described it there about almost getting stronger. I think we will get smaller in number, but it will allow us, instead of providing education for the nation, if we were providing education for a faith community, a Catholic faith community, then it will allow us actually.
I'm just wondering, though, in the modern world, when you have maybe many teachers of no religion in the schools, the ethos is going to get somewhat frayed, I would imagine anyway. And the model where the state is paying for primary school education for all, not enough, but paying nonetheless, and for secondary education for all, not enough, but still doing it. Is there any case that says that the state has an obligation, given what happened to the Constitution and so on, to have religion in schools? the state pays.
You put your finger on something, and I think you're right, in the changing Ireland and in a move towards a much more secular and so on. One of the difficulties you put your finger on is the teacher, because you have a whole range of people in school, obviously, who teach, ranging from people who really don't practice and find it very difficult and find themselves, to the people, and we're very fortunate. I mean, we have a couple who are completely outstanding, who are immersed in it, and not because they are being forced to, but because it's a lived faith for them, and that's an exciting thing for us. In a church has always, by the way, in persecution has always thrived, and that's why it's an exciting time for the church, because as we get more and more secular, hopefully the church will rediscover Christ.
We were talking earlier about schools trying to facilitate and maybe resisting the change. A suggestion from one of our listeners: why not simply have religion class as first one in the morning, so the kids who don't want it come in late, get a snooze, or have it last thing in the afternoon, so they go early if they don't want religion. And we think that the kids might vote with their feet on those two options.
Well, that's the danger with even the ETB changes. One of the problems that we know that some schools have is they don't want to introduce this because they are are not confident, the opposite of confident, that most children won't want to do it, will opt out. And that's why the Religion Teachers Association is having problems with it, because they're afraid that they won't have anybody to teach religion to. But there's one important thing about parents. The primary right that parents have, and this is a constitutional right, is the right for their children to attend schools without religious instruction.
Last word.
Yeah, and I understand it, but we don't allow young children to make decisions. I mean, if we did that, then kids will not go to poetry class, or will opt out of history, because I don't particularly like history and I hate maths. So the reality is, you bring children along if we accept, and I think this is the fundamental point. If the child's sick, you bring them to the doctor or whatever. But we recognise there's a soul, there's an inner world, there's a relationship with God, and that's why we cannot let go of it.
You believe, not recognise. Others don't believe that, and they shouldn't be forced into your beliefs.
Michael, I know.
On that note, contentious note, we will leave it there. Thank you both very much for joining us.
Thanks, Brad. Thank you.